to another fantastic cruising section publics night, and it's really a great pleasure for me to welcome Mike and Nic Reynolds, who are going to be our presenters this evening. Mike and I started sailing together in the early 90s, I think, and spent many hours on the water listening to skipper's abuse and getting on with the job and so on. And thankfully for me, Mike is a fantastic navigator and managed to steer us clear of any real obstacles and also help us in great success in the races we participated in. Once Mike decided to go his own way and get his own craft, he migrated from that to a 24-footer and then to actually buying the yacht that we'd raced on, which was renamed Critical Path as a Viking 30, fractionally rigged. After a few years of that, he decided he wanted to go for something bigger and better, and commissioned the building of a Reynolds 38 called Degrees of Freedom, which guaranteed
our poverty, guaranteed our poverty forever.
Yeah. Well, yeah. and so he campaigned that both here and then around Australia and up to Ambon and Ambon, was it?
No, just around Australia.
Yeah.
Island.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. And in the Sydney Hobart. So and then back to WA, and then back around to Queensland, I think.
To New South Wales.
New South Wales, and from there, Mike decided that.
Mate, you're giving the talk.
Oh, sorry. Enough history.
We know who he is.
So I'll let Mike introduce his latest love and joy, which he's had for 8 years now.
A lot longer than that.
Sorry, I was talking about the This is a boat talk, isn't it?
Kinda.
All right. So Mike and Nicky are going to talk to us about their adventures. Firstly, in going from Australia to England, and secondly about what they plan to do about getting back. Exactly. And so please welcome Mike and Nicky.
Right. First of all, thank you, Clive, and thank you all for coming. I can't tell you how wonderful it is to be back in Western Australia. I've only been here for 2 weeks. We'll be on a plane back to the UK in a few days. But we've had a fantastic time here. We've spent a lot of time at the club most evenings for the last week. And it's great to catch up with so many people. It's just fantastic to be home. And I guess this talk is about our plan to get home with our boat. So let's get started. So as Clive so kindly explained, we sailed from WA to the UK in 2015-2016, took almost exactly a year. We're currently filling the cruising kitty in the UK, as in we're working, and when we've got enough money we'll start coming home. While we've been over there, we've sailed around the UK, which is a different story. I won't go into that in great detail. Currently we're living aboard on the boat in St Catherine's Dock, which is 200 metres from Tower Bridge in London, right in the centre of London, which is a fantastic place to be. You can't do much sailing there. It's a really expensive marina, but it's a very cheap apartment. And there's a lot each winter there's a lot of cruisers from all over the world that stay there, so there's a great sort of community there, especially over the winter. We expect to depart the UK in 2 years' time, and it might take us 10 years to get home. We just don't know. But one thing's for sure, from the UK heading here, there's more continents to see. There's a lot of stuff to see, whereas from WA to Europe, you can see our track here. that took a year. We spent about 6 weeks in the Caribbean, and that was a recce, and we needed to get on and get to the UK, but we knew that when we go back and continue our journey, we'll be going through the Caribbean, and we'll probably spend at least one season there. And on the top right, you can see where we've been around the UK. That's the Caledonian Canal, which is fantastic inland waterway. Lots of locks. The locks are all operated for you, and you get to see a lot of Scotland going through there. So, overview. We're going to talk. So I'm about to do the history. Then we'll go on to the first verse, which was how we prepared the boat for our voyage from WA to the UK. Nick's going to talk about feeding the crew. Bit of stuff about what we saw along the way, and importantly the lessons that we learned, which inform how the changes between what we've done so far and what we expect to do in the future. So the second verse is future. It's all expectation and plans. It's not real yet. We know it's going to happen, but it's our thoughts today as to how we're going to do things when we come on our way home. And again, preparing the boat, feeding the crew, seeing the world. Please ask questions as we go along. Don't wait to the end, so just make yourself known. Far away. So history is, as I was saying, we raced and cruised Cruden Path, previously Botticelli, which is 1930. We cruised Degrees of Freedom, which was a Reynolds 38 around Australia in the 2000s. And Zen again, our current boat, we bought it in Queensland. We took it south to its home in Maitland's Bay in New South Wales and got it ready for cruising over about a year. And then we sailed it north to the Northern Territory. Our plan was actually at that point to sail across the Indian Ocean and head for the UK, but we found we had a leaky boat. So we were convinced to go up into Southeast Asia to Thailand for a refit, which I'll talk about a little in a moment. We had the refit, had a great time sailing through Southeast Asia, had the refit done in Thailand, fixed the problems, sailed home to Fremantle Sailing Club. We're here for a year, 18 months, and then headed off towards the UK. So that's the Viking, that's the Reynolds 38 in Tasmania. So that's the history out of the way. So first verse, the boat is a Japanese 1980s three-quarter tonner, so she's 34 feet in length. Quite beamy, 3.5 metres, drafted 2 metres with all the cruising stuff on. Fin keel with full-length skeg. She's solid GRP hull, balsa sandwich deck. Less than 5.5 tonnes empty. Quite a lot of ballast in the keel. Quite a stable boat with an SSS of 39. Kim, is that a reasonable number? Very. Good. I can tell you she's quite a stable boat because we have tried her severely at times. The rig is quite big, I'm told. We'll get more into the sails in a moment. There's no spinnaker pole. That's because when we bought her, the inner forestay was removable. We made it permanent, and the topping lift became the staysail halyard. So we had no topping lift, so we got rid of the pole. We do not run, ever. We jibe downwind, we just find it more comfortable, and we still end up keeping up with the 40-footers. So, mind you, there's quite a lot of slow 40-footers out there going around the world. It's heavy mast, there's definitely oversized rigging, and previous owners, as I say, she was built in Japan. Previous owners sailed her from Japan across the US and then circumnavigated South America, so she's been around Cape Horn. And the second owner sailed it single-handed from Japan over to Canada, into the South Pacific to Australia. Had a big accident that ultimately caused the leak that I mentioned earlier. After various adventures that I won't go into, she was repaired and spent about 8-9 years racing offshore in Queensland, and that's when we bought her. So the preparations for the boat were in 2013, so we'd had her for about 2 or 3 years. This is the refit we had in Thailand. So the delaminating old repair was removed and made good. So basically there was a big rip across the hull forward of the keel because it had hit a reef. The keel had ripped itself out of the front of the boat and poked up in the back of the boat. And it had been repaired, it lasted for 10 years, but then it started to fail, delaminating. So we had a lot of work done. The hull was planed because we had a bit of osmosis, so half of the hull was planed off, just leaving the rest of the hull as a mould, and then they laid up new glass. So basically the hull below the waterline is completely new fiberglass. The skeep, the keel attachment of the skeep was heavily reinforced, the rudder was rebuilt. I had the top set, while we're at it, we had the top sides, the deck and the rig stripped and repainted, and all those other things done. We had actually had copper coat anti-foul put on when we were on the east coast of Australia. We had it done again after this refit. We're very big fans of copper coat. I think it's known here as copper shield. So fantastic anti-foul. Our current anti-foul's been on for 7, approaching 8 years. It takes us half a day to prepare the boat, put it back in the water. So, apologise for any blatant plugs. I have no allegiance to any of these products other than loving the products. 2014 we put in a new engine. That's because when we were leaving Thailand, the plan had been to sail west of Sumatra down to Cocos and then down to Perth. But basically I bottled it because I wasn't comfortable with the engine. And we put in a new engine and went down through via Bali and across to the Pilbara. Having put in the new engine, done all the refit, and done a bit of sailing, we were a lot more confident in the boat. So in 2015, back in Fremantle, we had a cruising main made, which was the size of the main with the first reef in it. And we've got the running rigging for 2 reefs. So the first reef took down to second reef size. The second reef lines took it down to trysail size. And that was one of the smartest things we did because the boat was really easily driven. The masthead rig and a big Yankee head sail, and knowing that we're going to be trading in sailing practically all the way to the UK, we could roll in and out the big headsail, we could reef down the main, and that worked very well. Put in a new fridge, we thought we were ready to go, DSC, and the new EPA, that's about it, and we were ready to go. So this is the electronics we had on the boat. From the right just shows you that it's a mess. So we had a small Garmin chart plotter with a display far less resolution than your mobile phone, but it was functional with Garmin charts. We had 2 Raymarine autopilots with 2 on-deck rams. So because we're tiller steered, we couldn't use a below-deck ram. It's an on-deck ram, and Raymarine swears blind that they're built to the same standard and are good for the same life. As you'll see later, they're clearly not. We had a Garmin VHF, which had an AIS receiver. We added a Vespa transmit AIS, which became our main GPS as well. We had a HF radio and the Ready to Go, and we were running Open CPN chart plotter on MacBooks, that very MacBook right there, and iPads running iNavX. And in our electronic system, there were lots of NMEA 183 connections, like serial connections that are point to point. There was a lot of wiring, a lot of looking after. For weather forecasts, we were using Predict Wind and Sail Docs to get group files. So basically, you'd send an email telling the guy at the other end what you want, what area of latitude, longitude, the box that you want the weather information for, and he sends back an email, the computer sends back an email with the group file for you, and you ask for how many days and for what bits you need. So two of the most important things in terms of lessons learned are on this slide. the Cape grid information is very, very valuable. So it's convective, you don't need to know this, but it actually stands for convective available potential energy. But it shows you where the thunderstorms are. And that's really, really helpful. The second thing that's really important is the ocean surface current grids. It's only become clear in recent years that there's actually a lot of movement. There's the old pilot charts say that there's a big circulating thing here in the Southern Ocean. It goes the other way in the Northern Ocean and what have you. But there's all sorts of gyres come off those things. There's different currents, and we got these current grids and we followed the current religiously, and other boats didn't. And for example, we know of a boat that went around the south coast of Madagascar, and they were doing 5 knots through the water and 0 over the ground, and they got pooped and filled up their boat to the floorboards and had a thoroughly nasty time. And we were 50 miles away, and they, by the way, they were exactly where Jimmy Cornell said they should be, going around the bottom of Madagascar, but because the currents on the day were bad in that location, they got hammered, and we were 50 miles north, and we had 2 knots of current with us, much smoother seas, and had a good time. So that's the value of this current measurement, and as technology goes forward, this current information will become more and more accurate. Right.
Sorry, Mike should have said if people have got questions on the way through, just yell out. And,
yeah.
Are you getting those from Tide, those groups, or are you subscribing to them with the currents?
No, I'm just requesting them by email in the same way that I was the grids from sail docs. So there's one called RTFS, couldn't tell you what it stands for, real time offshore, who knows, just guessing. And there's another one called Oscar, which is the name of the satellite that produces the data. But that's 4 years ago now. I don't know what the situation is now. But the key point is that when you're out there in the middle of the ocean, there are currents that 20 miles away are with you, and where you are against you. So what we found is it really helped a lot to keep ourselves out of those bad places.
And sorry, just going back to the other screen, Mike, the one before, you had something on the iPad, the thing on the iPad?
iNavX is actually one of the most popular apps on the iPad. It shows, it supports various charts that we use Navionics. There was another app that we actually liked more, which is called CIQ, but they don't support Navionics at the moment.
So is that linked to OpenCPN,
No, it's separate app. Yeah.
So how do we get to download your brain tonight after all this information, Mike?
Don't know, probably involves surgery, mate.
There's a huge amount of information, there's a lot of good information.
Yeah.
But things are moving so quickly.
Yes. Yeah. And I wouldn't claim to be fully up to date. I'm explaining the experience we had now 4 years ago.
But we need to start somewhere. Yeah.
No, that's right.
Mike, wasn't clear the answer about the iNavX. Is that a Navionics program?
No, it's a third-party app.
But it works on the Navionics.
They support Navionics charts. Yeah. Okay. But it's one of the most popular iPad apps for chart plotting. So it supports Navionics charts and various other charts. It displays AIS information very well. It's just a good all-round chart plotting app. And one of the things you'll see as we go on, so we're falling behind, so, I was going to say, what was I going to say? I don't know. Yeah, iNavX is good. CIQ is good, but doesn't support the same array of charts. The AIS information is there, all the stuff you expect. So you can I think you can overlay group files and that sort of stuff. But yeah, what I was going to say is, as time goes on, or as time has gone by, we're using less and less fixed equipment. The general point I was going to make about electronics is that our instrument panel is becoming more and more vacant. I've had to rebuild it. It's just a white panel with circuit breakers because all the displays are on our tablets. Right. Including on deck, we use we've got several iPads, all in waterproof cases. We've got the MacBooks, which clearly are not waterproof. They're running open CPM, but there seems most of the electronics is disappearing behind the covers, and the displays are on portable devices. That's what we're finding, and I think that's particularly true for the smaller boats, because who wants to spend $5 grand? When you've got a small boat, who wants to buy a modern, you've got everything expensive chart plotter when you can just buy an iPad and use it for a whole host of things, and get 3 of them. Keep one of them in the cooker if you want to avoid the electromagnetic.
So without going too much into detail, Mike, years ago you were talking about HF and this sort of stuff, and what's your preferred method of downloading this now?
Satellite.
Via which?
I'll get to that.
Okay.
But we had Iridium Go on for the first half. What we'll have from the second half, we don't know yet. It depends how things evolve between now and when we leave. I'll talk a little bit more about that. But it's now time to talk about food.
It's moving 1,000 miles a day.
Yes, I just wondered whether the Iridium Go worked all the way.
Thanks, Mike. So Mike has spoken a bit about preparing the boat for our trip to the UK. I'm going to talk about the other side of the coin, which is looking after the crew, the people who will be sailing the boat. Because of course that's obviously quite important to make sure people are getting the food and nutrition that they need. When it's really rubbish outside, having a tasty filling meal can really make the difference between a great voyage and quite an ordeal. So it's something that does require consideration. These are some of the principles that I picked up, which I hope are helpful, particularly if you've got a long voyage ahead of you. It's true that wherever there's people, there's food, and that's something that people sometimes get very anxious about when they provision. So wherever you go, there's going to be somewhere you can buy food. That said, we only plan to provision at major ports because that's where you get the biggest selection and the quality is better. So in that case, we need to figure out, how much we're going to need, between these major ports. It's important to know what your boat's capacity is. So, for example, where are you going to store your fresh food? If you're going to have it somewhere where it's not stable, if the food's rolling around, it's going to get bruised, it's going to go off quicker, it's not going to keep so long, so that requires thought. When we were travelling from Carnarvon, I discovered where we put our fresh food, the sun was coming in through a side window and was cooking it, so I had to sort of cover up the window to sort of keep it in the shade. With bulk goods like flour and rice and those sorts of things, it's important to think about where you're going to store those, because you don't want them getting wet, you don't want them escaping from their containers, so it's important to think about where they're going to go. And also canned stuff, where's your canned stuff going to go? Understanding your water capacity. We have tank water only, we don't have a water maker. So combined with our tanks and our jerrys, we had about 280 litres of water max. So that's something that we had to sort of take into consideration, when we were travelling between ports. It's useful to think about your stowage areas and, a bit of lateral thinking sometimes, can you use other areas, to store food that you wouldn't otherwise think of? And we actually used under the floorboards to store cans because they were relatively dry and, nothing was really going to happen to them there. So definitely provisioning for long voyages, whether it's across the Bight or across an ocean, it definitely requires thought and some planning in detail. This is me 4 years ago, before we left. So this is my galley here. So as you can see, there's not a lot of room there. And we've got a 3-burner stove, a grill and an oven. Behind me is the fridge, which Mike built. So we do have a fridge. It's a small one, but it works well. We don't have a freezer. And we've got a little sink there, and you can see the shelves in front. So that's what I have to deal with, and so that's what I have to take into consideration when I'm provisioning. So when I'm planning, basically how I've done it is have to calculate, for example, when I was going from Carnarvon to Rodriguez, we were going to be going to Cocos Keeling for 2 weeks, but we weren't going to be provisioning there because there's not a great deal of supplies there, and they're also eye-wateringly expensive. So I knew that it would take roughly 2 weeks to get from Carnarvon to Cocos Keeling. We'd be in Cocos Keeling for 2 weeks, and then it would be 2 weeks to get to Rodriguez, Port Matarani, Rodriguez. So total duration would be 6 weeks, but then you add a bit of excess because things happen. I mean, the weather can turn bad and you can be stuck in port for a long time. Things break. You know, we had some friends who lost their rig from Chagos to Rodriguez, and they had to motor for some of the way, and of course that will slow you down. So you do need to have a bit of an overage, you know, for your travel time. So I calculated about 60 days at sea for the first leg. Once you've got a rough idea of the number of days you're going to be at sea, then I'll put out my daily meal plan. So of course it depends on what people like to eat and your eating patterns, but we have usually 3 meals a day, so a breakfast, a salad or sandwich lunch, and then a fairly substantial evening meal and pudding. That's right. So that's what we like to eat. Yes?
280 litres of fresh water seems a very small amount of water for several weeks away. How much do you budget on per person per day?
We'll come to that in the next slide. But that's just to illustrate that that's what we have. So we do have to bear that in mind with, you know, with the resources that we have. So once I've, you know, got the meal plans in my head, I'll also have a daily meal plan, and then I'll then build up a plan for a week. So each day of the week will be different because obviously you don't want to be eating the same stuff day in, day out. You know, you want to keep them very happy. But for example, what I might do is I'll have like rice with a meal for an evening meal, but I'll cook a bit over and then I'll keep that in the fridge, and then that'll be a rice salad for the next day. Or whether it be pasta or beans or potatoes or whatever, you know, you can sort of plan it that way so you don't sort of waste too much there. So basically, once I've got my weekly meal plan, I'll then multiply that by the number of weeks I'm expecting to be, you know, to be between ports, if that makes sense. We don't tend to, you know, get many things like bread and cakes. I bake bread, so you know we'll have flour and, you know, cake, flour and sugar, and you know I just make it up from basics, so that keeps the space storage requirements lower. Like I said, we need to consider finite resources. So what are those? I mean, as I say, we don't have a water maker, so I'm not going to be cooking stuff that needs a lot of water, like you know, cooking chickpeas or kidney beans or something that you've got to soak in water first and then you've got to cook them for quite some time. I'm not going to be steaming treacle sponge puddings because, you know, they take several hours. Yeah, sorry. So obviously gas and water are the two things you have to bear in mind. And also considering conditions at sea versus the anchor. I mean, going across the Indian Ocean, you're on an angle, you know, it's pretty bouncy. So if you saw that picture of me in the galley, I had like a strap that I used to sort of hook myself onto so I could actually work hands-free. So even if I'm sort of at 45 degrees, you know, I've still got 2 hands free. In the South Atlantic, it was absolutely idyllic. You know, virtually no swell and light winds, and you can do a lot more, obviously, in the galley in those sorts of conditions. At anchor, again, you can be a lot more creative with your cooking. So you've got a bit of leverage there, but at sea, you know, we keep things pretty basic. You don't want too many things ending up on the floor, which does happen. So with regards to provisioning and how you get it back to the boat, the biggest headache we had was keeping cockroaches off the boat, particularly in the tropical areas, because they just get everywhere, and no matter what you do, all it takes is one to get on board with some eggs and you've got a problem. So to try and keep the bugs down to a minimum, it's really important to get all the packaging off, particularly cardboard, because they love cardboard. So all the cardboard goes off before you board. Also really, really important to sort of check what you've got really, really carefully, because they will just get into everything. And yeah, they can be pretty elusive. Another issue, so anything starchy, you weevils. So we had friends that had microwaves on their boats, so you can, we just used to sort of zap it in the microwave for a minute, and that tends to kill anything living. Yeah. with the cans, just anything with the label, we use a marker pen because the labels will come off even if you think they won't, and you will not remember what's in those cans. So you do need to make sure that there's some sort of a code or something so you know what's in them. We put the cans in the bilge, so obviously nice low down. You don't want things in a seaway to be up high because you're going to get thumped on the head, you know, when you open your cabins. And we had a soda stream rather than soft drinks, so we didn't have anything canned because we just didn't have the space. So again, that just comes back to your storage capacity. So, when I talk about long passages, most of our trips across oceans were normally about 2 weeks, give or take a couple of days. And what we found is that most of our supplies, fresh supplies, lasted that long. For longer passages, for example, from St Helena to the Caribbean, which was 31 days at sea, these are the sorts of reflections we took on board. So to answer your question, with regards to saving water, that 280 litres, we still had plenty left over when we got to St Lucia because we had a saltwater pump. So what we would do is we would wash your plates and dishes in salt water and then you do a final freshwater rinse. You'd give yourself a saltwater shower and then just rinse off quickly with fresh water. I didn't wash my hair for a month and my hair was absolutely fine at the end of it. Seriously. You realise how little you need to wash your hair when you've been at sea.
And Mark found the same thing.
Yeah, the exact answer to how much water we used was 3 litres per person per day, and we had of that half a litre was washing. So after every 2 or 3 days, we'd have a litre and a half that we'd literally put in the bottom of a bucket, or we'd wash ourselves with salt water, with a bucket, and then we'd rinse off with a litre and a half of water, and that felt good.
Yeah, it feels amazing.
So no clothes washing?
No. And I mean, to be honest with you, you don't really know. You're not wearing a lot of clothes anyway. So in the South Atlantic, you don't really need to. We had like a little garden sprayer, like a pump action, and we used to use that as a shower as well. So again, you can see exactly how much water you've got, so you can rinse everything off, and quite simply. And that's all you need really. You do not need much water to keep yourself clean.
Yeah, but cleanliness is really important, but it doesn't take a lot of water, fresh water, to stay clean.
Yeah. So in terms of saltwater sores and those sorts of things, you do need to make sure that you...
Any ability to collect rainwater?
Yeah, we do. I mean, we in Southeast Asia, we collect loads of water using our boom tent, but we never found on the passage. We never found ourselves wanting for water, and so we never had to try. One of the things we are planning to do, which actually I kept meaning to put in the slides but forgot, is that we're going to build a canvas water catcher under our solar panels that'll have a hose fitting on it and it'll go down into jerry cans. But we didn't find the need for it on our voyage.
We had a small pressure cooker, like a little 1.5 litre pan, and that was incredible. We'd use it for cooking all the time, and you can cook things in a fraction of the time that you would with a regular cooker.
So you're saving gas.
Yep, and often you need less water, so it saves water, it saves gas, and it saves time. On longer voyages, trying to keep things fresh, avoiding stuff that's been refrigerated goes a long way. Once it's been refrigerated, it just goes off really, really quickly. Before we left it, there was a brilliant farmers market down at the school in South Fremantle, and we just stopped up there, and also in Carnarvon there was a great farmers market, and where you can go to places where they're not chilled. Potatoes will last up to a month, onions last a long time, those sorts of things. We didn't put a lot of vegetables in the refrigerator, we didn't need to. We did not refrigerate eggs either, but obviously you need to store them somewhere where they're going to be fairly safe. Discovered a trick about, particularly with whole cuts of beef or lamb, if we put them in these click seal bags and covered them with oil to exclude the air and just threw some herbs in, they kept for up to 2 weeks. So that pretty much did us for most of our voyages. Chicken, I believe, you need to eat up a bit quicker, so that goes off quickly. Mince, anything that's been minced, obviously, that needs to be eaten
Did you cook the beef and lamb before you put it in the sealed packages?
No,
or
No, it went in the fridge, so it went in Plexil bags in the fridge, all sort of stacked up together in a plastic box, and they kept absolutely fine.
Would you use vacuum sealed if that was available? I know it's not
Yes.
everywhere.
Some butchers will do that for you. They'll vacuum pack meat and they'll freeze it for you. And if you've got a freezer, I mean, so much the better. And we knew friends who did that. I mean, they basically had fresh beef for the whole trip. We didn't do that for this trip, but it's definitely worth doing. The mason jars at the top there, I used to bottle fruit, and they kept, they keep up to a year. They were really, really good because they're a good compromise between fresh and canned, so they tasted really, really good, but they had the advantage of keeping longer than fresh fruit. So certainly across the South Atlantic, when all the fresh fruit ran out, they came in really, really well. What we also did once we got into the second half of our South Atlantic trip was grow bean sprouts once all the fresh stuff had gone. And again, that's a really, really good way of getting all sorts of vitamins into you quite easily. You need hardly any water, really, really simple to do, and you can use just about any kind of bean or pea or lentil, and they all grow really well and really quickly. And of course, it goes without saying that really, really important to check your fresh produce when you've got it. So anything like cabbages or potatoes, check them, turn them over, make sure they're not bruised. The same with the eggs, check that they're not cracked, because if they're cracked, then they're going to go off.
How long did the longest eggs last? Or I guess you ate them before you got them.
About 3 weeks. I think we were still going strong after 3 weeks, but we just sort of crack them into a little cup just to be on the safe side, because you do get the odd one that goes off. Okay, so what did I learn? Basically, in terms of canned food, which we didn't actually eat anything like as much as I thought we would, the French territories have amazing canned food. So whether it's Mauritius, the leader price stores in Mauritius or Reunion, and in the Caribbean, they have the most fantastic cassoulets and tinned duck and all sorts of beautiful stuff. It was so good. Surprisingly, the US was pretty good. When we were in Bermuda and the British Virgin Islands, a lot of the tin stuff was American, and that was also pretty good. So I was quite impressed with the tin stuff there. However, some countries, the food standards are somewhat lower, and particularly anything starchy, you do have to be very, very careful, particularly in the tropics. And we bought some what we thought was Ribena sort of crisp breads in Mauritius, and didn't get around to eating them until some months later, once we were on the way to St. Lucia in the South Atlantic, and they'd been on board for probably about 3 or 4 months. Anyway, but we're getting a bit low on our fresh stuff, and it was an afternoon tea snack, and we had our cheese there and brought out these Ribenas, and as soon as we put them on the plate, all these weevils were all crawling all over them. And so it was a pretty special experience.
Always choose the lesser of 2 weevils.
So certainly the more developed countries, the less developed countries, you've got to be careful with your starchy stuff. Mason jars, the fruit jars were excellent, but they were too large for what I had on board. They were too tall, so I couldn't use them again. So that was a bit unfortunate. And we also discovered that a lot of the kitchen gadgets, so particularly electronics, some little mini choppers and stuff, they're not really designed for a marine environment. So when you get the salty air, they will rust, so they don't tend to last for very long. And finally, I wanted to share with you some of the references, because obviously I'd like to do a bit of research on how to provision properly. So Leonard Party's book I found was excellent. They did a 70-day trip or something like that from Japan to Victoria in Canada, and that was really, really useful to sort of learn how they managed to provision and cook for that. The Cruising Chef Cookbook by Michael Greenwald I thought was absolutely excellent as well. Very, very comprehensive. This guy was actually a chef for many, many years on various sailing boats all around the world. Incredibly comprehensive, probably a bit too detailed for some, and it's even got details on how to slaughter animals on deck, which I think probably most of us would need to do that. But again, an excellent source of information. The Cape Pastorius book, again, had some really, really good recipes. And of course, the Bible, Beth Leonard's Voyager's Handbook, very, very good information on provisioning and stowage. So I definitely recommend those 4. So, having spoken about how the spec, this was our trip. So this is where we went, yes?
You didn't mention eating any fish.
We didn't fish, no, no. We don't really have the room, and we just find there's just too much blood and mess for us to be worthwhile. We did have flying fish, to be honest, in the cockpit, but yeah, we couldn't really bring ourselves to eat those. But we do know people who fished, and quite often they'd have a great big fish they need to use up quickly, so you know it wasn't difficult to gain fresh fish if you wanted to.
In Anchorage's, Nick bakes a cake and we trade for fish.
There's always something that you can do that somebody can't. So yeah, that's the cruising community. It's you basically trade a lot. Yes.
A couple of things that you mentioned, like microwave and kitchen gadgets. Did you carry a genset?
No.
So you didn't have 240.
Well, we did have an inverter. It expired, but at sea we weren't using that kit, and it's mainly got hand powered gadgets.
Yeah.
But just making the point that
They do the same thing.
yeah, they do the same thing, but the manual things do it more reliably.
Yeah, they rust as quickly.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, these days a lot of the manual ones are entirely plastic,
Yeah.
so they're quite reliable in our experience. Shall I?
I'll just, so this was basically where we went. So you can see, so we went out to Cocos Keeling and then down to Mauritius, Reunion, around the bottom of South Africa, and then a big long passage across along the coast of Brazil, up to the Caribbean, through the Windward Isles, and then to the Azores.
To Bermuda.
Bermuda, sorry, and then the Azores, and then all the way to Falmouth. So that was our trip. So I hand you back to Mike.
Thanks, Nick. So just here you can see that we refused to dead run. Zigzagged our way across the South Atlantic. I think about there we said, shall we jibe today? And we said, no, we'll do it tomorrow. That was a great passage. So we did have occasional bad weather. Everyone always asks about this, so I thought I'd just tell you about the three sort of worst incidents we had. So there were three nasty instances of weather we had in that entire trip. One was actually from Carnarvon to Cocos Keeling, where there was just a huge trough sitting between us and our destination. It sat there for days on end, with us sitting in Carnarvon, wondering if it's ever going to go away. And eventually we said, well, we've got to get to Africa before the cyclone season, so we need to get out of here. So we went for it. It may have been a mistake, but we sailed through the trough. The photo on the right is actually from that storm. Got up to 50 knots. We're on the bare poles. We were pooped a couple of times, which half filled the cockpit, so not really bad pooping, but enough to half fill the cockpit. And there was a nasty cross sea, and a couple of times we got sideswiped, and the boat was just lifted sideways, and we had green water against the coach roof windows, and in a partial knockdown. So it was probably not a good idea to leave, but it gave us huge confidence in the boat to get through that. So that was kind of self-inflicted. And the autopilot steered all the way through there, including when we were under bare poles, and responded to the broaches and near knockdowns. We didn't have to go on deck and steer, and we never felt that we needed to use a drogue. But if we got into a really, really bad storm, then that would definitely be what we'd do. We'd use a Jordan series drogue. The second one was we were overtaken by a huge electrical storm, which we could actually see in the Cape grids, and we actually managed to avoid the worst of it. And weather-wise, it wasn't that bad, but it was just a huge lightning show. And as it came over the top of us, we had a near-miss lightning strike, which blew up one of the interface boxes on board. So it actually blew up some of our electronics. It confused our GPS as well, so we thought we'd lost our GPS in the main one in the AIS unit, and various other things were a bit weird. But basically, when the lightning hit, the autopilot lost its data, so it went into standby and the boat jibed itself, hove to. And then suddenly everything was quiet and nice, and we've been charging along at 7 knots thinking, wow, this is great, I mean, great progress. And then bang, jibed. And we were pretty knackered because this storm had been coming over us for about 6 hours from when we first saw the lighting on the horizon, it being overhead. And we suddenly learned the benefits of heaving to, because all of a sudden the storm just whizzed away at 30 knots where we've been running away from it at 7 or 8. So that there was a lesson in that if it's not a huge big storm with big breaking waves, then heaving to is perfectly safe, and the storm just goes past over you. And then thirdly, going from the Beady Eyes to Bermuda, it was just a very, very low cloud, completely overcast, and squalls were coming through, so the main was down to trysail size, but the wind at the time was about 18 knots. And so we had the jib just about fully out, sailing along, and as always, a change of watch. Both of us were down below for a couple of minutes getting changed, and then we just heard this ramping, you know, this big fan starting up, and that was a 60-knot squall that hit us. And we were under wind vane at the time. We broached, and then rushed on deck. Nic was trying to wind in the jib, but couldn't because it was flogging itself to death. I was absolutely convinced the mast was coming down, but we bore away, and amazingly the boat responded and bore away, which is one of the reasons why we love our boat so much, because not all boats would necessarily do that in that situation. We got it dead running. We were just surfing down one wave and up the back of the next with this huge rooster tail, and it was just mad, but we got it down to bare poles and we were still surfing. So I've got no idea how fast we were going when that happened. But that lasted 20 minutes. So most, you know, like they say about war, you know, it's 95% boredom and 5% pure terror. So
you didn't think to heave to in the squall?
Sorry?
You didn't think to heave to?
No. Sorry, in the storm, in the top one.
No, in the Beady Eyes.
No, that was just a squall, so no, we didn't, because as soon as we... the thing was, the headsail was flogging badly. What we needed to do was get it rolled up. So bearing away allowed us to do that, and then we could get the main down, and then it was totally under control. But if we were, I've got a slide later on how we intend to handle storms and bad weather, and it's been educated by these 3 experiences. But if the same thing happened, I'd do the same thing in this instance. But what I want to avoid, what I want to do next time around is avoid it happening. And the reason it happened was because it was overcast, we couldn't see anything coming, and we had no radar. So we want radar next time. Now, I'm going to move on. So, on passage, we love our HF and SSB. It's marvellous because it's the only way of talking to the other guys that are out there doing broadly the same passage, and we can talk to boats 500 miles away. So boats that had left up to a week before us, and boats that left a certain place up to a week afterwards, we're all talking to each other on a sked at the same time of day, and it's a great sense of community because you start chatting to people on the radio, they join the net, and then they come along into the anchorage and you meet, and we've just made so many lifelong friends in the adventure we had getting to the UK. Watches, we do from 2 to 6 hours, 2 when it's ugly, 6 when it's in the middle of the South Atlantic and it's just idyllic. We don't go below, when we're on watch, we don't go below for more than 10 minutes without a horizon scan. Some people might say that's too long, some people too short. I do a daily tour of the deck, checking for chafe and any rig problems, and throwing dead flying fish and squids and stuff overboard. That's the carcasses. Spend our time reading, studying, baking, relaxing, enjoying the sunrises and all that good stuff. one of the things a lot of people worry about is customs and immigration when you're going from country to country. My opinion is it's generally much ado about nothing, or very little. And certainly if you do the research, so look up what the governments of the countries you're going to say about what you need to do and where you need to go. So look at the official sites. noonsite.com is a great resource for this sort of stuff. And there are others. You need to look into visas, vaccinations, health insurance. So for example in St Helena, when you go to Customs and Immigration, they say show us your health insurance policy. And if you don't have one, you have to buy one right there and then. St Helena is not unique, but it's one place where you've got to do that. And importantly, play the game. So you're a guest when you arrive in another country. You're a guest, just as we expect people to be nice when they come to Australia, other people expect us to be nice. So play the game, be nice, and you just got to hope that the last guy who went through played the game, because otherwise you're in for a bad time. So seeing the world, we saw so much stuff, it was just fantastic. Cocos Keeling and Direction Island is well known as a blue water cruiser's paradise all around the world. Like the Oyster Around the World rally, when they do their surveys each time, about a third of the skippers regularly state that Cocos Keeling is the favourite place they visited, going all around the world. It's just a beautiful place. The cruising section should run a cruise there. South Africa, a bit scary and because of the Igor's current and the weather there. It's very like the east coast of Australia, except the current that runs down the coast is twice as fast, and it's quite scary. But on the other hand, and that 1 day in 10 where there's no southerly wind blowing and there's a light northeaster, you get 150 miles for free every day. So you can hop down the coast real quick, but you just got to be patient and wait for the right weather. The marinas in South Africa are dodgy. They haven't discovered piles, they just anchor everything. And if you saw our video, or you go on the club site and dig out our video from the Topics Night we did 2-3 years ago, you can see how the marinas get damaged occasionally. St Helena was fantastic. It's just a unique place. That's the bottom left there is Jamestown. They get sailors. They've been there since the 1600s, servicing passing sailing ships. They get sailing, totally. It's a marvellous place. But it's like being in the UK in the 1950s. You better nod and say hello to everyone you walk past on the street. It's a unique place. Bermuda is straight down, plus or minus 20 miles from Fremantle, so you just got to go there. If you're sailing around the world from Fremantle. And that's the bottom right, just fantastic place. And they also get sailors because they were also established in the 1600s, and it was all about sailing ships and stuff. Lessons learned, wear and tear. So our Yankee head sail was basically blown apart by our big squall that I mentioned earlier. We had to put several square metres of sticky back on it in Bermuda, but it's still being used. We had one metal headboard carriage fracture. So when we had our new main made, I explicitly had 2 metal carriages connected to the headboard, connecting it to the mast, because I've always been concerned about the fact that all the leach tension goes up into to those whatever's holding the headboard to the mast. So I've always had 2. One of them fractured, so and I think it happened during the score, and if that had gone, the whole main would have just unzipped itself in the mast. So if the top one goes, the rest are going to go. Mainsail itself is in really good shape. We just use lots of sticky back along the battens, full-length battens. This is a picture of the halyard and the BVIs, and I belatedly realised it was chewing itself up. So we started freshening the nip of the halyards. On the engine, we had very little problems. We were servicing it regularly, but the impeller failed at half the time it should have, and the exhaust temperature sensor failed, but both very minor things. Simonstown in South Africa is And if you think Fremantle's windy, you see nothing. Simonstown is just mad. But we had terrible fender rub, so we just rubbed the topsides paint down to white along the tow rail, because everyone jammed in so close you can't hold the boat away from the sides. 2 fenders blew up, and others just rubbed the hull. Had a mast nav light failed on our way to Cocos Keeling, so probably during that we went through that trough. And we were able to get a replacement sent to Cocos Keeling and set it up and collect it there, which was good. We also drowned several gas sensors because we copped a few greenies. We copped a lot of greenies, but we copped a couple when the hatch was open, when we were going up or down. And we got a really good one that came over and dumped a whole, I don't know, 20 litres on top of the cooker and down into the bilge, so it killed the gas sensors and it drowned the cooktop, so we had to take off the nozzles and clean them. Yeah.
Mike,
Yes.
I saw the solar panels there. What capacity did you have, and did they perform well?
Yes, they perform very well. They're 2 West Marine panels that are about 5 years old now. No, sorry, about 6 years old now. They put on in the refit when because we had the stainless steel work done to fit the new panels. They are 280 watts.
Total.
Total, yeah, I believe so. And when the batteries are low, if we let the batteries get really low, then we can get 30 amps out of them. But normally we're getting 5 to 10, including when it's quite cloudy. They perform really well. So we don't have a wind generator. I've never been interested in the wind generator because generally when you're cruising and going downwinds, the apparent wind's low, and I just don't like the noise and having moving objects over my head at sea, especially in a 60-knot port squall.
You mentioned gas sensors. Do you carry spare gas sensors?
Yes, we did. But more importantly, I had a little wiring assembly, because we'd had the problem before, and I'd made up this little assembly and realised I should keep it, so that within 5 minutes I could just, if you like, short out the sensors and have a switch to just turn on and off the gas without using the detector. We had the boat registered. When we bought the boat, it was registered in Queensland. When we moved into New South Wales, we had to put in a new gas system. We moved over here, we had to put in a new gas system. Now in the UK, we had to put in a new gas system. It sucks. The way that, even just between the states, there's all these different rules. But anyway, yeah, but on the other hand, I definitely believe in having a gas detector. That's important. Yeah. Heroes with the boom brake. I despise preventers. I'd never sail. I'd never rig a preventer on the boom, because it keeps the boom where you want it until it goes bang and snaps. The boom brake, on the other hand, will just, if you've got wind on the wrong side of it, it'll just go through slowly, which exactly happened when we were in that electrical storm. The boom just came across slowly, rested against the check stay, which we had rigged at the time because we were under trysail-sized main and storm jib. Just came across, the boat hove itself to. All I had to do was pull on the new windward check stay, ease off the lazy check stay, tie the tiller, go below, have a kick.
Is that a which brake?
Oh, the brake that we use, because the boat's quite small, we can just use mountaineering figure eights, which are like $10. And everyone's X-rayed, because if it breaks, the mountaineer dies. So,
Your next under the mainsail arch, you've got the mainsail sheeted onto your targa bar kind of thing.
yes, so we've got like an arch that supports that's what the dodger is attached to, but more importantly there's 2 main sheets that are attached to it, so that each main sheet goes from the boom down through a block, back up through the block, forward along the boom, back down to a winch. So we've got 2 main sheets. And if you go to windward, the uphill one is sort of acting like a traveller, and the downhill one is acting like your sheet. The beauty of it is it gets the main sheet entirely out of the cockpit.
So how did you go about engineering that? Does it move a bit or?
We just over it. Well, I didn't engineer it. I just told the stainless steel guys, look, this has got to stay where it is.
Yeah.
If the boat jives, and so it's built out of 1.5 inch diameter stainless.
And the fixings at the deck level, that's
Are very strong.
just back plates and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And importantly, the main sheets are racing braid. They're not high modulus Spectra or Dyneema, so they've got stretch in them. So yeah, the main sheet arch. We had stainless during the refit. We extended so the whole push bit with the arch for the solar panels. As part of that, we extended the tubular structure forward as part of the lifelines right up to midships, and that totally changed the feeling of sailing on the boat. We went from feeling like we're sailing on the boat to in the boat. It's really weird how a bit of stainless steel tube replacing a piece of wire can change the experience of being on a boat. But they were great. The Iridium Go was fantastic. The SSB was fantastic. Solar panels, autopilot. Pressure cooker and soda stream were fantastic. The villains were the autopilot rams, which are good for about 2/3 of an ocean each. So we now, we had about three when we left. We arrived with one working.
You meant Tilapilot?
Yes, but the ones that are rated for open, so so it's just a ram, it's not the whole thing. So the controller is just like you have on a big boat, but it's the ram that goes onto a tiller. And they're not good for more than about 6,000–7,000 miles.
When you're talking about the autopilot ram, was that electric or hydraulic?
Electric, yeah. Unfortunately, they're all built of plastic. I'll come back to that. There's a Californian company called Pelagic Autopilot that builds autopilot assemblies, but the ram they provide is a drop-in replacement for the Ray Marine, and it lasts the same length. So it's no better, but it's 1/3 the price. So those are the only ones we carry now. They're very good. So lessons learned on the storm tactics. Number one, don't be there. In short gales, heave to. If it's a real storm with big breaking seas and you've got sea room, run off. I mean, there's nothing new about this. This is what practically everyone recommends. If you're silly enough to be out in the storm with no sea room, you don't have much sympathy from me, and I hope I'm never there. But if I was, I'd do what they did in the bad Sydney Hobart, where the boats that came through the storm coast reached, hand steering, and hope for the best. Don't want to be in that situation ever. In terms of gear, we have really good reefing systems, and the cruising main is small so that we can manage stuff. Our staysail is a storm jib. We've got a Jordan series drogue, and the only piece of advice I can add that might be a little bit different is when bad stuff happens, stop and think. You know, something like when that squall hit, we just reacted, we knew what we needed to do and just hoped for the best. But I've been in other situations where you've got time to think and you don't need to rush in, and a little bit of thinking, I think, can do wonders. This is a picture about half an hour after the big squall out of the BVIs, and to see what the visibility was like. You couldn't see anything coming at all. This is a picture of the one thing that didn't work in our refit was because the rig had been pulled apart and stripped and repainted, they'd taken everything off. And when they put the gooseneck back onto the mast, it was screwed in. They just screwed it back in again. But all of the screws pulled out after about 500 miles when we were in the middle of the Java Sea. And we just made it safe. It was towards the end of the day. We just pulled out the main, made it safe, kept sailing under jib, and just went to bed. And I was just waking up every hour thinking, what's the best way to deal with this? in the morning by the morning we had a cunning plan on how to repair it properly. So we offered the gooseneck back up, just put the threaded, but just pushed the bolts through because they just pushed through because they'd stripped the threads, wrapped sticky back around, and then just wrapped VB cord around so that the metal we put on top wouldn't scratch the paint, and then and we had a set of really long hose clamps that we just put. It took about 3 hose clamps to do a complete circuit, but we had enough to go through 4 times, and I don't think that actually needed repairing. It could have kept using it forever. But the point is, when you've got time, really do think about the best way to deal with something.
Mike, the Drogue, did you ever use that?
No, and I hope I never do. But I'm talking to some people here and other cruising people we've met. We know plenty of people who have used them, and there seems to be a very strong consensus that the Jordan Series Drogue is one of the best alternatives. Certainly for a boat like ours, I think it'd be good. But clearly you've got to be running off, so you've got to have sea room. But at least it'll slow you down if you don't have a lot of sea room. But it'll steady the boat. But one of the things there is to make sure, is to consider where your engine exhaust is. Because if you're going slow and you've got big following seas, then there'll be a lot of water trying to get up your exhaust. And I know our boat got in that situation. It was owned by some first Japanese owners, and they flooded the engine. And so you're not only going through a storm, but when you get out of the storm, you've got no engine to go anywhere. So, yeah. Anyway, pushing on. So, wow, we're into the second verse. So that was the first verse. Any questions on the first verse? Okay. So when we got to the UK, we sold the HF, we sold the Iridium Go, and we sold the Aries, because for the first two we knew that we were going to be in the UK for a few years. Who knows what will be available when we do leave, and we needed some cash. So that was good. We got rid of the Aries because it was actually the original Aries that had done all the sailing I described earlier, and we actually got it out of one of the ex-owners' shed. And in his shed, we put it back on the boat, and we'd tidied it up. But in Canberra, we had a workshop where I could do that. But in the UK, we knew we weren't going to have that. So, and everything was just wobbly and falling apart. So we actually got twice as much we paid for it, and that was good. The following year, we replaced standing rigging, put on a new furler because the furlex on the forestay was basically starting to fall apart. We reinforced the boom man, because one of the things we worried about all the way through was the attachment of the boom bang to the boom. Turned out not to be a problem, but we were worried about that all the way through because we changed just about everything else. But we hadn't done that, so we fixed that up in Scotland. We fitted the gas fire heater on the right, which in Scotland is a marvellous thing. We needed to replace the logging depth transducer, and we moved over to an all NMEA 2000 network. So we've got rid of all of the NMEA 183 stuff, which is the point-to-point connections that are so ugly, and now it's all a single network. We've bought some AIS man overboard devices and adopted LED flares. We bought some dry suits because we were going cruising in Scotland and we thought it would be really cold. It was really cold. Best thing about buying those was that included in the price were these really thick, warm onesies that go underneath the dry suit. They were our pyjamas for the whole winter in London. Never used the dry suit. In the last year we bought a riding sail, so it's a sail that goes up the backstay to hold us into the wind at anchor, because our boat sails at anchor atrociously. The riding sail just holds it straight into the wind at anchor. We've got some new upholstery, replaced the loo, and we've got a new HF SSB.
So Mike, the AIS, what brand did you get?
It's a Vespa XB 8000, which is one of the first ones. It's fantastic kit. New Zealand, so good on them. It's one of the first AISs that came out with a Wi-Fi hotspot, so we could connect so the iNavX running on the iPad gets its data by connecting to the AIS. Because the thing about AISs is, when they first came out, you could plug any GPS into them. They accept NMEA 183N. So you could put in complete garbage and it would be transmitted telling the world where you are. So the authorities rapidly worked out that was really not a good idea. So then the AISs came with their own GPS that you had to plug into them. So it was a fair dinkum position, hopefully, unless you're really clever. And so then you've got your AIS with a GPS and with interfaces out to everywhere. So the AIS becomes the centre of the world on your boat in terms of electronics. And so then Vespa figured that out and said it would be even better if we created a Wi-Fi hotspot out of the thing, because then it really is the centre of it. Then anyone can plug into this hub, which works really well. So yeah, it's AIS. So this year and next year we hope we've got to replace the cutlass bearing because the prop is a bit wiggly. There was a big thread on the Google groups, the cruising section, about seacocks. I said, why are my seacocks failing every 2 years? And we came to the conclusion collectively, I think, that it's because we open them and close them every time we use the loo. If there's two of you cruising for a year, doing what happens naturally several times a day, that's about 10,000 opening and closings, and yeah, they probably won't last. And indeed they don't. I can tell you categorically, they do not last, because we've done this twice now. So so you're going to have to replace the head seacocks. All the others are fine, because they're just you open and close much less frequently. Refurbishing head compartment, we've got lots of varnishing to do. Fitting wind instruments, we'll come back to. We need a new Yankee head saw, because like I say, it's more sticky back than head saw at the moment. Satellite comms, we've got to figure out Wi-Fi radar because of the score thing. We'd definitely like to have a wind vane if we can afford one, and we'd also like an auto prop propeller because the boat goes astern atrociously, has terrible prop walk. Although it's fin keel, it just doesn't like going backwards. So on those purchases, this is the HF we bought. As I mentioned, we sold our HF when we arrived in the UK. It was great, but it was a marine unit, and they're very expensive, and they don't have very many buttons. You just plug in the channel you want and talk and hope for the best. Totally recommend anyone who's going blue water sailing to get your amateur radio licence and consider buying an amateur radio. So this is the one. This is our radio installed. These are sort of displays you get. So you've got much more information. You can set up the radio much better if you're into that stuff, which I am.
So you're not using, you weren't, on your chatter channel, you weren't using marine frequencies, you were hamming, were you?
I could tell you, but then I have to go to jail.
Yeah.
The thing is, I've already admitted, have I? Somewhere in here, it says that I had an M802, which is illegal in Australia. It's a marine radio, but it's not rated for Australia. It's absolutely absurd. Anyone, police officer present? Like you're going to put your hand up. The thing is, the US has a set of radio regulations, and the M802 adheres to those. Europe has tighter regulations, which is why ICOM made the M801E, E for Europe. And then in Australia, we've got the M801E-AUS, which comes off the M801E production line and goes through further testing to see whether it meets the Australian regulations, which are unique to Australia. So the whole thing's mad. If you go amateur, then you don't have that problem. But if you open the radio, a ham radio, so that you can transmit on marine band, in the same way that you can buy an M802 or M801E and go function something 2, power on, and it opens it up to all frequencies, you can transmit on non-marine frequencies. So it's mad, you know, you've got these radios that are rated and legal, but you can open them up to transmit illegally.
So the receiving end of some of this communications, my partner was transversing from South Africa to Australia. There was only the one transmitter in South Africa that was actually on legal ban, so he went on to these ham radios to get messages through to me. They did transmit them, but they also then transmitted secondary messages to me on the receiving end. Who is this person? What is he doing? Very antagonistic and saying, my license is under threat. Having transmitted this message to you, I will do so in emergency situations, but please be aware that I'm doing you a significant favour and I need to know who you are and what you're doing.
Yeah, that's right. That's our experience as well, particularly around South Africa. But the thing is that amateur shore stations, so most amateur operators are on land, and there are specific stations that set themselves up to provide services to sailors at sea, but they have to be very careful that they're talking to licensed amateurs. And so it's not. I'm not suggesting it's a free for all, but I'm suggesting in terms of the equipment, there's not actually much difference in terms of the legalities between buying a marine radio and a ham radio.
Mark, did you come across any? There used to be what they call maritime mobile nets, which were run by hams.
Yes.
Are they still going, or that?
The American ones seem to be in the Eastern Pacific, but all of the nets that we were on were run from boat to boat entirely.
No, we had the ham radio operators. They switched to an open frequency, 8101 or whatever, and then they ran. This is the maritime mobile net, open for everybody.
Yeah.
But maybe it's a long time ago.
Well, those maritime marine networks are on marine frequencies. They may often be run by amateur operators, but they've been authorised to run these.
I never looked into the legal side.
Yeah. Well, we should probably move on, but just the important thing to end it on is that if it's an emergency, you can use any goddamn frequency you want.
Yeah.
That's what the law says. And so what I think is important for cruisers to do is make sure that they're being sensible in what they do. I mean, one of the nets that was running in the Indian Ocean, which we didn't take part in, we'd love to have joined in, but we didn't because it was on an aviation frequency. And the only time I took part in the net was said, guys, you're on an aviation frequency, why don't you move somewhere else? And they wouldn't, so we let them do their thing. So, pushing on, I mentioned we'd like to have wind instruments because we don't have bragging rights if we don't have, recorded information saying it was 60 knots. But we would like to have wind instruments. I really like this piece of kit. I think it's marvellous. It's NMEA 2000. It's a complete weather station. No moving parts to give you the... So the wind whistles through here and is measured. But it's also got a GPS built in. It's got attitude, 3D acceleration, compass, and also pressure, temperature, humidity for about twice the price of buying your regular yachting wind data, wind equipment. So that's kind of cool. I want one of those. I also want one of these, but I can't afford it. But more generally, for satellite comms, we've come to the conclusion, although we loved the Iridium Go, we think we should have a satellite phone that we can jump into the life raft with. The Iridium Go is no good for that whatsoever, unless you really think you can keep your mobile phone dry. It's not going to talk to anyone without something attached to it. So I'm a bit down on the Iridium Go there. But what I'd really like, in addition to a satellite phone that can be in the grab bag, the new Iridium Constellation supports higher bandwidths for lower cost than previously. They actually originally said that when we bought our Iridium Go, they said with the next satellite constellation, it's literally called Next, that the Iridium Go would support it and you'd be able to get greater bandwidth, but when, after they launched the satellites, did the test, they discovered that actually you can't go any faster. But there are cool pieces of equipment like this. This is about that diameter, so it's a small radar. It's got phased array antennas in it. So most satellite systems, if you go beyond the Iridium Go, you've got a housing with a parabolic antenna that's following the satellite as the vessel moves. This doesn't need that. But very cool, but too expensive still. So I'm hoping in 3 or 4 years it'll be affordable.
Do you know about the in-reach communicator, the little handheld units that allow you to send SMSs anywhere?
Yeah, I do know about them. They're not sufficient for our needs because they're short messages. Yeah, but good kit for in some scenarios, certainly. Yeah. And possibly an alternative to a satellite phone for an emergency device. Yeah. For the radar, for finding those schools that we didn't see coming, we'd like to have a radar. And there are these Wi-Fi radars now that you only need to supply 12 volts and mount them, obviously, which is always a big thing with radar. But it's relatively simple installation, and you don't need to cut a hole in the instrument panel. It's on your iPad, connected by Wi-Fi direct to the radar unit. So that's perfect for our. I mean, we're not looking for long range. We're not looking for all the fruit of the fancy radars. We just want to see the rain coming. On the wind vane, we had an Aries on Zen again until we got to the UK. We had monitors on the 2 previous boats. Currently looking at the wind pilot, mainly because its attachment point is so small, so it's so easy to mount. The monitors and the Aries have these big brackets that go around the working part, so maybe they provide some protection, but they're big and ugly and heavy, whereas this is elegant.
Mike, will the wind pilot do emergency steering like the monitor?
No. Actually, with additional fittings, as with the monitor, yes, I think it will. Yeah, similar sized paddle. So good luck with it, kind of. Actually, I don't think the monitor you can buy the MRUD, which is like a bigger water paddle that you fit instead of the normal steering one, which you then brace into place. So yeah, it's not as good for that. On the bottom there, as I mentioned, the pelagic autopilot. So the rams that we have, because we're tiller-steered. Sorry, we need to push on that. Okay, Nick's got a couple of slides and then I think we're done. Are we okay to continue? Sorry we've gone so long over.
All right, so I'll just quickly skip through this. Basically, what we would do different, it's actually not a great deal. It actually went fairly well the first time round. So really, we just got rid of stuff that we don't use because there's no point keeping stuff that is just taking up space and isn't doing the job. So we basically, keep the galley gear right down to, essential items. We did come across a vacuum packer, so we do have one now, and that's proven to be very useful. So that will be a useful addition to our long distance sailing wardrobe. We like to have pressure cookers so much we've got a larger one, and we're also intending to buy smaller mason jars, so I should be able to sort of bottle fruit and veg on trips, which will certainly again maximise our distance with fresh produce. We're trying to reduce reliance on shore power. It just makes sense to be able to do that. So we've got a yogurt maker, which is basically like a thermosfast kind of concept, where it just sits in a bath of hot water. So we'll see how that goes. We've also got a manual sort of chopper blender sort of contraption that's a bit like a salad spinner, but you use like a pull cord to, that's sort of along those lines. That actually works out really, really well. And regarding the provisioning, our fresh supplies lasted a lot longer than I thought they would. And we didn't use anything like as many cans as we thought we would. So I don't think we'd be buying as many cans as we did next time round. With regards to processed food like breakfast cereals, we just found it to be a bit of a waste of time and space. They tend to be packed in a lot of air, and when you're trying to store stuff, there are a lot of room for what you actually get. and many of them, particularly in some countries, are just sugary and not very good for you. So for breakfast we tend just to have eggs and bread or porridge oats or something now, rather than actually looking for cereal as such. The picture shows how we managed our waste. So we would keep drink bottles and we would put all our plastic garbage into these bottles, and I think, was that our St Helena trip?
That's from a month at sea. So everything that wasn't organic went into the milk and just got chopped up and stuffed in. It's amazing how much you can get into a milk container.
And the good thing with those is it's sealable, you haven't got the stink or anything like that when you're when you're sort of putting stuff away.
Sorry, just going to say that the concern is we got to St Lucia, where did it go? Was it properly disposed of? But all you can do is what you can do. So.
Yeah. And different countries have got different standards in recycling. Again, the French islands are very, very high. Other countries not so much, unfortunately. We are trying to reduce our plastic packaging, obviously being a lot more aware, and particularly at sea. I mean, you see the plastic garbage just everywhere you go. So we don't want to be part of that problem. Just trying to reduce our reliance on as much disposable single-use plastics as possible. We're using more beeswax cloth, which you can use to keep a lot of fresh items wrapped up, and you can just rinse them and basically reuse them. So that's what we're basically aiming to do, is reuse more and just use less plastics overall. So, where are we going from here? This is me in my Scottish outfit, sailing from the Outer Hebrides to the Isle of Skye about this time last year, actually. There are too many, there's an embarrassment of possibilities where we could go from here. We would really like to go around the UK once more. We've already done it once, but trying to fit in around work plans is very challenging. So we did it very, very quickly, and we'd like to do it properly in slow time. So that's something that we are planning to do next, in the next year or two. We'd love to visit Ireland, we'd love to go across the north of Scotland, possibly Shetlands, northern areas. We'd love to go to the Baltic. It's sort of quite high on our list of places to see. The Meg, possibly. People do rave about it, but there's a few issues that we have to consider. Obviously we're going to go across the Atlantic again, so we want to spend more time in the Caribbean, probably the east coast of the US, dodging the hurricane season. Then we will get to the west coast somehow, either through Panama or around Patagonia, depending on how much time and how much we want to be cold. And of course South Pacific to New Zealand, and then the Southwest Pacific, and then back to Australia again. So these are the sorts of places we could possibly go visit. Yes?
When you say the Meg's got a few issues, what are some of those issues?
At the moment, there's a lot of political instability in some of the countries, and what it's meaning is a lot of people are leaving areas and they're concentrating in places like Croatia and elsewhere, which means you just got this sort of convergence of people, and it just means that it's difficult to get into places, and they're staying longer. So then you've got issues with weather, and when the sailing season's over, you're still having to go travelling at less favourable times. So yes, we've already been through the Caledonian Canal, as you saw, but we'd love to do more of the northern coast of Scotland, but that takes time, obviously, because it's that part of the world and the weather can change in a flash, and you do need time to wait it out, otherwise you pay for it. You can see the Orkneys there, you can see Shetland, see the Faroes, you can just see Iceland just poking through the top left-hand corner. That's a possibility if we get time and if the weather's good. Otherwise we could probably turn right and head for northern Europe. So this whole area, sort of around here, had very sort of good reputations from people we know that have sailed that area. The sailing season is short, but I don't think it'll be a problem for us because we're in the vicinity. So Denmark, Sweden, Finland, and all those wonderful places. And then, of course, once we finish with the Baltic, we will be heading down the Biscay coast, which is an area Mike and I have been absolutely dying to see. So Brittany, northern Spain, the Rias of northern Spain, Portugal, before we take ourselves down to the Canaries. Oh, beg pardon, if we do go to the Med, these are the sorts of places we could see. However, as I've mentioned, there's a few issues at the moment with people sort of converging in reduced numbers of ports, so we're not going to be doing it for a couple of years anyway. We'll just have to see what eventuates at the time. So we're in two minds, let's say. So once we get to Portugal, we'll be heading to the Canaries, just here, and then down to the Cape Verde, and then we'll be jumping off to the Caribbean, where we'll be doing it properly this time, and spending a season. Like to see the Bahamas. I think Caroline and Andrew Bellamy are currently in the Bahamas, or they have been.
Guadeloupe.
I'm in Guadeloupe now. Lucky them.
Oh, sorry?
Yeah,
Yeah, no, moved on from Guadeloupe.
So these are the wonderful places you can go, you see. So we hope to visit the Bahamas, and we may see the east coast of the US as well. Again, there's some great places to see. So again, depending on time and our situation, that's somewhere else we may go. I will hand you back to Mike.
So love to see Baja California, love to go to San Francisco and those places, but from Panama going up that coast is quite hard work, I'm told. So we might go via Hawaii because we can. But it's all totally kind of fantasy. Who knows what we'll do? But summary: we need more autopilot ram spares. We should heave 2 more often. We'd like to have radar. We'd like to have wind instruments. I think the on the safety kit, the AIS man overboard thing is a great thing, because if you're out in the middle of the ocean, an e-bird's all very well, but it's going to take a while for anyone to come get you. The laser flares or LED flares, as I mentioned, the sat phone in a grab bag I think would be good. Communications wise, I'd like to have more bandwidth, not to surf the web, but to get inevitably the grid files are going to get better in terms of their accuracy, but also if you want better current information, that, as I mentioned, I think it's really important. More bandwidth would be nice to help with that. And the point of the picture on the right is know your boat. This is taken from a little inspection hatch where Nick's just held a camera up to it. And it's a bulkhead in the forward wall of the lazarette, looking into the space behind the engine room, or behind the engine. This is this cavernous space that nothing's in there apart from the prop shaft and the support for the P-bracket. But I managed to get in there and get out at least once. And it's just a complete dead area in the boat that we've never explored. And you need to know every part of your boat, I'd suggest. So thank you for your patience. I hope I haven't outstayed our welcome. Just about everyone's still here, which is great. Like I said at the start, it's been great to be back in Fremantle, great to be at Fremantle Sailing Club. And thank you all for listening. If you have any more questions, please go ahead.
Robbie and I followed you guys as you've been doing it. We really admire what you've done. It's absolutely fantastic. And your understated way of saying it tonight was really great. One of the things that you've talked about it, the occasions when you've hit rough weather.
Yes. But
is it fair to say, from your guys' perspective, you don't really hit much rough weather when you're following these trips?
Yeah, like I said, 95% boredom and 5% terror. And that's worse than the reality. It's like 0.1% scary stuff. And the thing is that if you're sailing around the world, what everyone tells us, and most of the people that we sailed with across the Indian Ocean were completing their circumnavigation back to Europe, so they've done most of it already. And everyone agrees that the Indian Ocean the southern Indian Ocean is one of the hardest passages because the trade winds are the strongest there. And certainly we found the transition from the southern Indian Ocean to the South Atlantic just chalk and cheese. And the proof of that is, the proof of that is the insurance premiums went down by about a third. We haven't said a great deal about the Indian Ocean passage. It was strong winds. We were doing nearly our whole speed the whole way, and that which is what everyone was doing. We probably had a fairly benign experience in the southern Indian Ocean. I've heard plenty of people who've had worse, but yes, most of the time it's great sailing. North Atlantic, a bit grey, a bit chilly, but when Nick and I started sailing together, I was all about sailing, and Nick was about the destinations. But we now share. Now we've met in the middle. We both enjoy the sailing. We both enjoy the places we go, and the places you go and the people you meet is what it's about. I mean, I love the sailing, but we've made so many great friends and had such great experiences, seen parts of the world that you can't. It's very hard to see any other way. For example, St Helena. So yeah, and thank you for your comments.
Yes.
I heard what you were saying about radars, and we ran into a sandstorm outside Salalah, about 5 miles off the coast, put on our radar and couldn't see anything. There was so much sand in the air, and the wind was blowing, so what we did, luckily we hove to, because as soon as it cleared a little bit, there was this big bloody freighter right in front of us. We could sail straight into it.
Right.
We didn't have an AIS, and as soon as we got ashore, we were actually picking up our AIS. And I can't, the AIS would have told us what was around us, but the radar, and we've tried to use radar for weather, and I have to say we found it a bit disappointing. So think about it, because it's another expensive thing, which.
That's right. That's a fair comment. The Wi-Fi radar I mentioned is relatively cheap. It's meant to be a cheap and cheerful radar. I wouldn't claim that radar is the answer to all problems, but we have had radar on. Then again, had radar when we bought it. We actually took it off when we had the refit in Thailand because we weren't using it very much. But we had used it to find rain, and it had been useful. And we sort of regret taking it off, but it was very old, and we figured it wasn't going to last much longer. But
I think it's important that they to mount the radar down on the transom on the front of the mast. It's not as effective as picking up tropical squalls, because you've got to
you want to look at stuff that's coming behind you. Yes, that's right. Yes, Terry.
So you talked about insurance. 2 questions. Which insurer did you use to go around, and also what is your principal software for your navigation?
Right, so insurance is Topsail.
Topsail, okay.
And very happy with the service they've provided, but we've never had to make a claim, so touch wood, may that continue. For the chart plotting on the iPad iNavX, as I mentioned, on the laptop, we're using OpenCPN, which allows us to use the CAT charts, so the Google Earth type charts. And our chart plotter, the built-in chart plotter we have, which is a really tiny one, very cheap one, but it's got Garmin charts. So we've got the CM93 or CMAP charts on old ones on OpenCPN, the ones that cruisers hand out to each other. Garmin on our chart plotters, and Navionics on the iPads. So we've got a whole range of charts.
I should just mention to the audience that OpenCPN is a free software, and I found out, and I've just on the last year, I've been downloading, and Mike is one of the stalwarts of I don't know how many charts you've downloaded, there's hundreds of thousands of hours of CAT charts, which is the Google Earth, so it's a marvellous resource.
Yeah, all I did was, I made...
Spent half your life.
No. What I did was gather CAT charts from other folks and put them in one central place, and then made a whole lot more. So they're not all mine. They're from half a dozen different sailors who had made collections of Google Earth charts into CAT format. So if you go to our blog, most on top left of our blog, there's the most popular post, and it's almost always the one that points to that Dropbox library of these cat charts. So they're by world regions. So there's ones for, there's some, it's actually remarkable. The least covered part of the world is Australia. There's some WA ones from on our way out, but there's a lot of Southeast Asia. And the point is, there ought to be most of these, well, the need for these charts is in third world countries where the charting is not very good. So there's lots in Southeast Asia. And then we did charts of all the islands we were expecting to visit and some bolt holes that we may or may not go to. And it just shows you a lot more than a chart in some instances. And the things up in Indonesia, the man-made structures may have changed in 5 or 10 years since the last satellite photo, but the bricks haven't moved. And with the Google Earth imagery, you can actually see reefs up to several hundred metres offshore. If it gets to a couple of hundred metres, then Google fades to black and doesn't show you anything. So you've got to be wary of that. They're not a chart, they're just a picture.
Yeah, and I'm just downloading the charts for Bali 2020. So I've been gathering charts. And some of the paper charts, actually, they were charted in 1880.
Exactly, yeah.
So, compared to a Google satellite image.
Yeah, and the important point there is the bricks haven't moved. They just didn't know where the bricks were because back then the position accuracy was poor. Now you've got a very accurate position of where you are, but the chart has moved. Right. Back then, when they were using those charts, they didn't have GPS. They didn't know where they were. They took a bearing on a headland, looked at the chart, and everything worked out. But as soon as you've got an accurate position, so in OpenCPN you can just swap from one to the other. And we've been in Indonesia sailing down a channel, knowing we're in the middle of a channel, and the chart says we're going over the headland, and Google Earth says we're going straight down the channel. So there's the value.
Mike, I'm just wondering if you come across people that have been involved with the ARC world and what your impression might be of that?
Yes, we have. Just about everyone says it's a fantastic thing, a great party. You know, there's a lot of socialisation and a lot of dinners and all that sort of stuff arranged. I think it's the various different ARC events are great for people who are just getting into cruising, blue water cruising. So a lot of Europeans love doing the ARC across the Caribbean because they're going with a bunch of other people. They get a lot of support. The organisers do things like check their HF radios and check this and that and the other. So it gives them a lot of help to get started, but it is expensive.
Look, another question. I actually bumped into Mike and Reynolds introduced us very soon after you built Degrees of Freedom.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, why did you choose to change out of that boat?
We were broke in Canberra. I was sick as a dog for 3 months after we sold that boat.
Folks, we're going to have to wrap that up. Mike and Nicky, it's a tribute to how interested everybody is and so on that we've allowed this to go about an hour over time. And it's absolutely fantastic that you've been able to impart this information and it's done on such a practical level and it's been so useful for everybody here. Really thank you for putting the effort into the presentation and our appreciation. Please accept and enjoy it. Thank you so much. Everybody, I'm sure all those that are coming have already registered for the Progressive Dinner, which is on Saturday night. If you haven't, it's too late. And for those that have registered, I'll be sending out the final information later on tomorrow, late tomorrow morning. So look out for that through email. Also, next Thursday, Steve, you want to talk about next Thursday? Where is he?
Oh yeah, there's another cruising talk. We're lucky enough to have another cruising talk next Thursday this month. Jill Paul and Jill Carter. So yeah, please come along to that as well.
Yeah. So next Thursday, 7:30. Paul and Jill Carter.
Next Thursday will also be